The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. Longman Simplified English Series. Read by Surya Thomas. Chapter 28. The Treasure Found. Within a few minutes the news had spread, and a dozen boats full of men were on their way to the cave, and the ferry boats were filled with passengers. Soon followed Tom was in Judge Thatcher's boat. When the cave door was unlocked, a sorrowful sight presented itself. Redskin Joe lay stretched upon the ground, dead. He had died of hunger. His face was close to the crack of the door, as if his longing eyes had been fixed to the last moment upon the light of the free world outside. Usually one could find half a dozen bits of candle stuck by tourists on the cracks of the walls of the first chamber, but now there were none. The prisoners had searched for them and eaten them. He had also managed to catch a few bats, and those also he had eaten, leaving only their claws. Tom was sorry for him, for he knew from his own experience how this fortunate man had suffered, but although he pitied him, it was a great relief to the boy to feel safe again. Redskin Joe was buried near the mouth of the cave. The morning after the funeral, Tom took Huck aside to have an important talk. Huck had learned all about Tom's adventures from the Welshman and the widow Douglas. By this time, Huck described his entire adventures on Cardiff Hill, for Tom had only heard the Welshman's part of it. "Well," said Huck, "finally, I expect that the money in the box has gone from number 2. It'll never be ours." "Tom," "Huck, that money never was in number 2 at the inn." "What?" Huck guessed cleanly at his companion. "Tom, have you got on the track of it again?" "Huck, it's in the cave." Huck's eyes blazed. "Say that again, Tom. The money's in the cave. Will you go with me and get it out?" "Of course I will, but what makes you think that the money is—" "Huck, just wait until we get there. If we don't find it, I'll give you everything I've got in the world." "Is it far in the cave?" "I've been on my legs a few days, but I don't think I could walk more than a mile." "Huck, I'll take you there and back in a boat, and you needn't raise a finger." "Let's start now, Tom." "All right. We want some bread and meat, and our pipes, and a few bags, and 2 or 3 kite strings, and some of those new things they call matches." At noon the boys set out in a boat borrowed from a villager who was absent. When they were several miles below Cave Valley, Tom said, "Can you see that white place up there?" "There, there's been a landslide." "Well, that's where the hole is." They landed, and Tom proudly marched into some thick bushes and said, "Here it is, the finest hole in the country. I've always wanted to be a robber, but I knew I had to have something like this first. We'll keep it a secret, and tell only Joe Harper and Ben Rogers, because of course there must be a gang. For style, Tom Sawyer's gang. It sounds splendid, doesn't it, Huck?" "It does, Tom. And whom shall we rob?" "Oh, almost anybody. We'll lie in wait for people, as robbers usually do, and kill them." "No, not always. We'll hide them in the cave till they can pay a ransom." "What's a ransom?" "Money. You make them get all they can from their friends, and after you've kept them a year you kill them. If they haven't collected the money, only you don't kill the woman. They're always beautiful and rich, and frightened to death. You take their watches and jewelry, but you will take your hat off and talk politely. Roberts are perfect gentlemen. You'll see that in any book. Why? It's grand. Tom, I believe it's even better than being a pirate. Yes, it's better in some ways because it's close to home and circuses and things. The boys then entered the hall, Tom leading. They crawled to the farther end of the passage, made their kite string fast and moved on. They presently entered and followed Tom's other passage until they reached the pit. The candle revealed that it was only a steep clay slope, 20 or 30 feet deep. Tom held up his candle and said, "Look as far round that corner as you can. Do you see that? There, on the big rock over there, down with candle smoke. Tom, it's a cross. Now we've found the real number 2 at last. Under the cross, that's just where I saw Redskin Joe hold up his candle." Huck stared at the mysterious sign for a time and then said in a shaky voice, "Tom, let's get out of here." "What? And leave the creature?" "Yes, leave it. Redskin Joe's ghost is hanging about there, I'm certain." "No, it isn't, Huck. It would haunt the place where he died, at the mouth of the cave, 5 miles from here." "No, Tom, it wouldn't. It wouldn't hang round the money. I know the ways of ghosts, and so do you." Doubts gathered in Tom's mind. Then an idea occurred to him. "Look here, Huck. What fools we're making of ourselves. Redskin Joe's ghost won't come where there's a cross." "Tom, I didn't think of that." "That's lucky for us. Let's hunt for that box." Tom went first, cutting rough steps in the clay slope. As he descended, Huck followed. 4 passages opened out of the small cave in which the great rock stood. The boys examined them with no result. They found a corner in the one nearest the base of the rock with some blankets spread in it. But there was no monkey box. They searched and researched this place, but in vain. "He said under the cross," said Tom. "Well, the rock is under the cross, and the money can't be under the rock itself, because that's resting solidly on the ground." They sat down, discouraged. Huck could suggest nothing. "Look here, Huck," said Tom at last. "There are footprints and some candle grease on the clay about one side of this rock, but not on the other side. Now, what does that mean? I bet the money is under the rock. I'm going to dig in the clay." "That's not a bad idea, Tom," said Huck, brightening up. Tom's knife was out at once, and he had not dug 4 inches before he struck wood. Some boards were soon uncovered and removed. They had hidden a natural hole which led under the rock. Tom got into this and held his candle as far under the rock as he could, but he said that he could not see the end. He proposed to explore. He bent down and passed under the narrow way, descended gradually. He followed its winding course with Huck at his heels. Tom suddenly turned a short curve and then examined. "Good heavens, Huck, look there!" It was indeed the treasure box, occupying a little cave. Near it were a couple of guns in leather cases, an empty powder barrel, 2 or 3 pairs of old boots, a leather belt, and some other rubbish. "We've got it at last," said Huck, digging among the coins with his hands. "We're rich, Tom." "Huck, it's too good to believe. Let me see if I can lift it." The box weighed about 50 pounds. Tom could lift it in an awkward fashion, but he could not carry it. conveniently. I thought so, he said. It seemed heavy that day. They carried it at the haunted house. It is a good thing that I brought the bags. The money was soon in the bags, and the boys took it up to the crossrock. Now let's fetch the guns and things, said Hug. No, Hug, leave them there. They're just the things to have when we go robbing. We'll keep them there all the time and hold our meetings there too. They soon came out into the bushes and lunched. They smoked in the boat. Tom rowed back in the long twilight, and they landed a little after dark. Now, Huck, said Tom, we'll hide the money in the widow's woods shed, and I'll come up in the morning and we'll count and divide. Then we'll hunt for a safe hiding place for it out in the woods. Stay here while I borrow Benny Taylor's handcart. I won't be a minute. He disappeared and presently returned with the handcart. They put a small sack into it and started off, dragging the load behind them. When they reached the watchman's house, they stopped to rest. Just as they were about to move on, the watchman stepped out and said, Hello, who's that? Huck and Tom Sawyer. Oh, good. Come along with me, boys. You're keeping everybody waiting. I'll pull the cart for you. Why? It's fairly heavy. What have you got in it? Bricks or old metal? Oh, all metal, said Tom. The boys wanted to know why they had to hurry. Never mind. You'll see when we get to Widow Douglas's. Mr. Jones left the cart near the door, and Huck and Tom found themselves pushed into Mrs. Douglas' sitting room. The place was grandly lighted, and everybody that was of any importance in the village was there. The widow greeted them pleasantly, but Aunt Polly blushed with shame at their dirty condition and shook her head at Tom. I met them right at my door, and so I just brought them along in a hurry, says Mr. Jones. And you did right, says the widow. Come with me, boys. She took them to the bedroom and said, Now wash and dress yourselves. Here are 2 new suits of clothes, shirts, socks, everything. There. Huck's no. No, thanks. Huck, Mr. Jones bought one and I bought the other, but that fit both of you. Put them on. We're wet. Come down when you look respectable. As she left, Sid appeared. Tom, Auntie has been waiting for you all the afternoon. Why are all these people here? Asked Tom. It's one of the parties that the widow is always having. This time it's for the watchman and his sons for saving her the other night. Some minutes later, the widow's guests, including a dozen children, were at a supper table. At the proper time, Mr. Jones made his little speech. He thanked the widow for the honor she was doing him and his sons, but says that there was another person who had played an important part in saving her. He then revealed the secret about Hart's share in the adventure. The widow heaped thanks and praise upon Huck, who already suffering from the discomfort of his new clothes, had now to suffer a greater discomfort and gets an applause of everyone. The widow said that her house was now Huck's home, that she meant to have him educated, and that when she could spare the money she would start him in business in a modest way. Tom's chance has come, he said. Huck doesn't need it. He's rich. The silence was a little awkward. Tom broke it. Has got lots of money. Oh, you needn't smile. I can show you. Just wait a minute. Tom ran outside. The guests looked at each other, puzzled and inquiringly at Huck, who was tongue-tied. Tom entered struggling with his sacks. He poured the mass of yellow coins up on the table and said, "There, what did I tell you? Half of it is Huck's and half's mine." The spectacle took everyone's breath away. Then there was a call for an explanation. Tom provided it, and that was a scarcely an interruption from everyone to break the charm of its flow. The money was called at. The sum amounted to a little over $12,000. It was more than anyone present had ever seen before at one time, though several persons were there who were worth considerably more than that in property.